Hello, thanks for tuning in to this vlog and podcast series that you can find on YouTube, on Spotify, and all the other platforms. A series of interviews I do on an irregular basis with, on the one hand, media scholars, professors, researchers from around the world whose work inspires me, informs my work and my teaching, as well as media professionals. Established practitioners in various media industries working in different parts of the world, sharing what's it like to make it work in the media. And today I'm really excited, as I always am, to host a conversation with Femke Lakerveld from the Netherlands and Brian Steward from the United States. Femke is a well-established Dutch actress, performing artist, cultural entrepreneur. She starred with leading roles in various Dutch films directed often by Eddie ter Staal and Theo van Gogh, the late Theo van Gogh. Played roles in numerous television series and miniseries, like a miniseries on the life of Freddie Heineken, Van God Los, well-known Dutch series, commercial work. She's played in musical theater and composed music for films as well. She's also a coach working for the Dutch institution Cultuur en Ondernemen, which assists and advises and supports people in the cultural and creative industries trying to set up their own business or career. And she's one of the co-founders and director of the progressive organization or movement, I should say, Vrij Links, Free Left, in the Netherlands. Next to Femke, I'll talk with Brian Steward. Brian is currently the director of the Colorado Film School in Denver in the United States, one of the top film schools in the country. Brian has had a long and distinguished career in Hollywood, in the American film industry, getting his start at Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment as a runner, and working his way up to assistant director, having some high-profile credits on movies such as The Italian Job with Mark Wahlberg and Charlize Theron, A Man Apart with Vin Diesel, the Spy Kids movies with Roberto Rodriguez, and so on and so forth. A fabulous career, lots of ups and downs. The stories of these two film and television workers are what we explore in this interview, where we talk about how do you make it work in these highly precarious and uncertain industries. How do you find what you're worth in an industry that preferably wouldn't pay you anything for your work? And what makes this interview truly special is not just because these two are amazing human beings and wonderful people, but that we explore the balance between what it takes of you as a person when you're so invested, so passionate about the work, as the majority of the people in the media industry, wherever they work, are, and on the other hand, try to remain some sense of balance, of business, of value, of you know, like Brian says in the interview, you gotta pay the rent. You gotta put food on the table. You become a parent. You've got responsibilities. Their perspectives, both in front and behind the camera, offer a unique window to look at the global film and television industry that I hope you're gonna enjoy as much as I did. Good day. Thanks so much, both of you, Femke, Brian, for logging in, for being here today on the very different circumstances, zooming in from 3 different countries and 3 different time zones. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate this, and so lovely to see you. I just want to kick right off our conversation with asking you a little bit if you could share your story about, I guess I would say, how you made it work. I mean, you've both had, and in Femke's case, you're still right in the middle of your film career. Ups and downs, got early breaks, wins and losses as things go, and I can appreciate that people always want to know, like, how do you do this, right? How do you get in? How do you get your break and all that kind of stuff? And like, how I know both of you is that beyond your specific skill set and your talents and so on and so forth, what really made a difference in the stories you always told me about your work was friends. People you like, you love to work with, and that doing that kind of work with those kind of people made the difference, rather than, working with the best director or with the biggest budget or with the most prestigious production company. And this emphasis on friendship really, I mean, for me, that's always a theme in the stories you told me. Is that the key, or is there something else to how you made it work? Femke, if I may ask you to kick us off.
Of course. Well, thank you first of all for your invite. It's lovely to have this platform and talk about these great subjects. Well, in my career, honestly, if I'm talking about acting, my media career or my film career, I didn't have many plans to start with. What I did do, when I left secondary school or college in America, and I made a poignant choice, and I wanted to study social sciences, so I did. Meanwhile, I was playing music, playing a guitar, electric guitar in a band, and I just loved doing that. But during my younger years, I never dreamt of becoming an actor. I just had a lot of preference to go to cinema or to know about film and all these things. So in a way, for me, it wasn't like a path that I kind of urged to go, or that I took, or a range of choices that I was very aware of. My first film I made when I was about 19 years old, I think, and I was in a band, and we were not successful at all. We just played, I think our main stage was Het Oude Pothuis, which is one of the smallest pubs in Utrecht, where I used to study. We didn't have any name for ourselves, but what we did do, we had a few friends. Well, just to point that out, and we had some connections, and people say, hey, it's quite cool what you're doing. It's original music. I've got this friend, and he's making his second film. You don't know him. But let me introduce you. So this friend of a friend was Eddie ter Staal. He made a film, and I was able to compose some music. And later on in the process, he asked me to play a small part in that film. And this was my start. And now it sounds really simple and like a matter of luck. But I thought about the factors that made that happen. And I think it's a mixture of, I was already pursuing something I really liked, which was music, which made the connection, even though it turned out I became an actress and not a musician. The other thing was I trusted these people, my friends, to say, hey, let me introduce you. And I followed these relationships. And I think the third thing for me was, yeah, some kind of curiosity that you always need to move on, you know, to be able to move on. You have to always kind of be curious to the next thing that might happen or that's going to happen. And in my particular case, I have to admit, I think there was also some vanity involved, because how does anyone wants to become an actor if you're not, you know? So there was some kind of thing, well, yeah, I can do that, you know, I can do that. Let me try. And that was the start of you know, making films and making more films. But you know, before I move on, it can be a very long story or a much shorter story. So maybe Brian wants to add something to the story now. But I can tell about, you know, I can tell more about my later career, because it wasn't all luck. So do you want me to continue?
Maybe Brian, just quickly, Brian, if you can, does that ring a bell to you? I mean, this combination of you know, doing what you want to do, even though it might not be exactly what you end up getting to do as a professional, following relations and friendships and trusting those relations. And then this sort of open heart and open mind and sort of an eagerness to find out what's around the corner. That's, if I summarize Femke's words correctly, is that something that you recognize as well, or are there some other variables in your case? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your initial break.
A lot of it. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk today, and it's really great to see you. And it's been way too long. So thank you. This is a really cool experience for me. So Mark, I feel like you've heard this story so many times that you could pretty much tell it yourself, and there wouldn't be a lot of difference. But so I grew up in the United States. I grew up in a little town called Terre Haute, Indiana, and all I wanted to do when I was a kid was work in the film industry. But I didn't really understand what that meant. You know, I didn't understand that, you know, what the jobs were. I didn't understand what, you know, really any of it was. I just had this vague idea that I wanted to work in the film industry. So, as you know, went to Indiana University for undergrad, got out of there in '84, and I had my heart set that I was going to move to Los Angeles. That was my thing. I was going to get out of Indiana and move to Los Angeles. And if you know the United States at all, you know that's quite an upgrade. So I went. I only knew a few people, but I knew the right people. My contacts came from my friends at Indiana University, because I didn't know anybody in Los Angeles. But what I did know was some recent graduates, one of whom had graduated a year before me, and he at that point in, you know, December of '84, well, he had his first job had been, he got an internship with Lucasfilm about the time that Return of the Jedi came out. And this guy, his name was Tom Bewley, and he's actually works back at IU now. He was about 6'4" and about 250, 300 pounds. And so Lucasfilm hired him to play Darth Vader at Return of the Jedi premieres. And long story short, after his boss at Lucasfilm moved on to Amblin Entertainment, which is Steven Spielberg's company, that was about the time that I moved to Los Angeles, and he was one of the only new people I knew out there. And I wasn't really sure what he was doing, but I looked him up and I found out. And I never really expected this to happen, but I'd been in Los Angeles for 2 weeks. And he called me and he said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'm, you know, trying to find a job. I've been here 2 weeks." And he said, "Well, can you come in and work?" And I was really confused. And I was like, "I can work? Sure, where?" And he goes, "Well, here at Amblin." And I said, "Okay, well, what am I going to be doing?" And he said, "Well, you're going to be delivering Steven's Christmas presents." So I spent my first couple of weeks in Los Angeles delivering Steven Spielberg's Christmas presents. And it was only supposed to be, well, I was actually only supposed to work for one day, and then they invited me back the next week. And then, you know, they just kept inviting me back. And eventually I just stopped asking if I should come back. And I just started showing up. And that was the beginning of my career. It was kind of mind blowing for me because Steven Spielberg was and still is one of my idols. And so it was as great a start to my career as I possibly could have hoped for. And I will admit, I had no skills, you know, not very much common sense. I was extremely naive. I had no idea what I was doing. But what I did know was how to work really, really hard. And I knew, and I was very cognizant of the lucky break that I'd received. And I was determined that I was going to make the most of it and that I was not going to let that opportunity slip away. So they somehow took a liking to me. The first movie I was really involved with was a movie Steven directed called The Color Purple. Then from there, I moved on and they put me on a film called Batteries Not Included. And that was kind of the start of my career. I decided I really liked working on set, and I was working for the assistant directors who, as your students may know, are the people on set who kind of run the logistics of everything, scheduling, you know, just keeping the train on the tracks, basically, as far as production goes. And I really like that because I got to have my fingers in, you know, in every little corner of the, you know, of the pie, right? I you know, got to know what every department was doing, and I got an understanding of how everything worked, and I love that. So I stuck with it for a few years, and I was lucky enough after about 5 years to join the Directors Guild of America, and I started working as an assistant director. And I had a, you know, what I thought was a, you know, really fun, awesome career. I got to do a lot of biggish movies. I got to work with a lot of directors like Steven. I got to work with David Lynch, Alan Parker, Robert Rodriguez, Gary Gray. You know, I was just really fortunate. Along the way, I had a back injury on a set, and that, you know, gradually put an end to my career as an assistant director. So, you know, you get to the point where you're like late in life, you go, okay, I can't do what I thought I was training for my whole life. What do I do next? So I went back to Indiana University and I started graduate school. I'd been lucky enough to make contact with Mark through a mutual friend. And Mark and I had an email correspondence that lasted, gosh, how long, Mark? Like a year and a half or so when you were writing Media Live. And we got to know each other really well. And Mark was kind enough to invite me to come to graduate school at Indiana University. And I applied and I got in. It was, you know, a really awesome thing that happened to me. And now I work as director of the Colorado Film School. We're an internationally recognized film school located in Denver, Colorado. And yeah, career's had some interesting turns.
So Femke, thanks, Brian. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, Femke, does this, I mean, Brian's description of his career, while modest, also suggests it's kind of this thing that you can't really specifically prepare for, but once you're in, sort of one thing leads to the next. Of course, it depends also on, like what Brian said, you're working hard, you're giving it everything you've got, you obviously love what you're doing, and you're, like you just said, which I thought was a really beautiful expression, this sort of curiosity, this open heart to what may come next, rather than, ooh, I'm not sure. You're sort of like, oh, well, why the hell not? Is that the story of how your career progressed as well, or may I invite you, and actually both of you also, to perhaps look a little bit at the bumps in the road, like what makes the work in a career perhaps less seamless as it seems to be in a story like this?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Also, since I'm you know, next to my work as an actress, I'm also a career coach for entrepreneurs in the creative industry, for artists. And what I often see is that people that are in the start of their careers, they can be very insecure about their choices or their also their resume. That's the right word? Yeah, for an CV, yeah, resume.
Yeah.
And I think a resume is something so interesting because it's almost something that reflects the choices you've made, you know, when you look at it. It's and also a resume kind of also should also suggest where you want to go to. So that's the things you want to kind of light out, you know. You can make 15 different resumes, but only one for the one you want, the path you want to go. But what I think is it's not so black and white. It's not like, oh, if you just you know, follow your intuition, it's gonna be okay. No, because you need to have a certain amount of moment or luck, you know, like Brian said, he had this moment of, wow, I was there at the right moment, the right time. I was, you know, with my idol. And I had that share of luck as well to be in this first film that turned out to be an award-winning film. You know, I can predict that. And I didn't get much money for it. I just, you know, took a chance. So that sounds like a lovely, bright, you know, great, you can make a film about that kind of a fairy tale about it. But the reality was that after that first film, you know, I got also insecure. You know, I'm not an actor. I'm you know, if I'm something in the creative industry, I feel like a musician more than anything. I want to be a scientist, you know, in the social sciences. So I kind of was very hesitant about my next move. I didn't know whether to pursue it, to pursue something that kind of put something in me that I thought was really interesting, but also very, you know, scary, you know, to go out there and say, hey, I'm an actor. No, I didn't do any film school. No, I didn't go to drama school. I just want to be an actor. That, you know, that's something that in my system was too bold. And so what I did is I did actually started working hard. You know, I thought if I want to, this first part could be a lucky shot, but if I'm gonna be asked for next part, then I'm gonna you know, I'm gonna have to be better than my first part. I mean, I wasn't very happy with my first part, but luckily someone asked me for a second part, so I had another chance to, you know, to improve myself, and I took that chance, and you know, from there on, it's basically a matter of hard work, and I think there's, you know, if you break it down in the Dutch film industry, for example, there are many people that are from film school that are now in our series and television series and films. There are many people that are in those films and television series that didn't do film school, but they somewhere had the chance to build up some experience. And on a set or in a different way, I know the director, who's my friend, Eddie Terstouw, who made this lovely movie called Simon. He started as a light assistant on a film set, and he made his way up, and now he made, you know, about 8, 9, 10, maybe 12 films that are you know, that he travels the world over. So that's you know, that's his path. And I think yeah, there's very different ways to go, but it's always a combination of you know, trying to recognize a moment, but then you always have to, you also have to make it your own. You know, you have to make sure, well, you know, what am I going to do with this? What's my decision about this moment? And you know, so in a way you can say, yeah, it's lucky that you were asked to do a second film or a third film or fourth film. But I also think that if I didn't get better in the meanwhile, if I didn't work hard, there wasn't going to ever be a fourth film, you know. So I think that's a combination. The other thing is that during my career, you know, you say, you know, you seem to be connecting with friends. Well, it's very lucky to be able to work with friends, because you're usually doing something you both have a connection to, or an aspiration to. But 99% of the work I did was for, no friends, non-friends. Yeah, you do a casting, you do work. Also, 99% of the work that I did wasn't so either successful, either very interesting, either very moving, either something I got lots of stuff out of it. But it's kind of every little thing kind of build up. It was a build up to getting more experienced. I there was even a moment where I was asked to do a live theater musical, which I was freaked out about, because I didn't have any feeling with that genre. I didn't sing, I didn't dance. I was freaked out about the question, and I thought, okay, I can pull this off, and it would be great to have such a stage experience. It was like in the bigger venues in Holland. So I would tour, and we would also tour to England, and we would also tour to Denmark. So there was no way I could say no. But on the other hand, it was like something I would never, ever desired or ever expected to do something like that. But then on that stage, I learned so much. I was taught so much, and I could take that to productions that are, later productions, smaller productions that I had a heart for, maybe about subjects or with characters that I had more heart for, and I could take that experience to that stage, that new stage. And I'm actually, in that sense, I'm grateful for everything I did, even the crappy commercials, just to say, they kept me alive. They gave me also my income, so I could do other stuff. So it's, and also on the film sets of film commercials in Holland, one of the best filmmakers are also doing commercials. This is maybe something that's only happens in a small country, because maybe in bigger countries there's a division between, that's a television director, that's a maybe stage director, but we're a very small country with a very pretty small language, so maybe people kind of swap art disciplines a little bit more. But yeah, I've met some of the best camera people on commercial sets. So we weren't making something that we all really loved, but we had so much fun and so much craftsmanship on that set, that it was just an honor to be on a set with so many craftsmen. And then, it makes you realize, it makes you realize how much you still have to learn, and how much you can learn from productions that are maybe not first choice.
Is that something, Brian, that it seems to resonate with your story as well? It's like you can't always pick the productions that you're going to be part of, but if you consistently, I remember in the past you would tell me, like, if you consistently show up first in the morning, and you build a reputation of somebody who is able and willing to do the work, and is willing to learn, then that in and of itself, rather than your degree or whether or not you did film school, as Femke was saying, perhaps is a better predictor for your success than anything else. Is that something that resonates with your story as well?
Absolutely. Going back to the start of my career, now that you mentioned it, one of the producers that was working at Amblin in those days was Kathy Kennedy, who went on to run the Star Wars franchise. And I was scared to death of Kathy. But whenever one of her assistants would call down to my boss's office and say, Steven's dogs shit on Kathy's carpet. Can somebody come up here and clean it? I was the one who ran up the stairs. They had to tell me to stop running. They had to pull me aside and say, please stop running up and down the stairs. We're afraid you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else. So yeah, and if and that, is kind of the less glamorous side of it. I would, do whatever I had to do to get myself in front of those people and to make myself useful in some small way. We were talking about, the bumps in the road. So the way I tell my story in the first part of this, your students might hear that and go, oh, that sounds very glamorous. That sounds very cool. It sounds very uneventful, like it all went very smoothly. And it did not. It did not at all. I was doing some great films and working with some great people in the first several years of my career. And it looked great on paper, but the fact was that it's a very precarious existence working in film production and working in media, especially when you're freelancing. And after I left Amblin at the beginning of 1987, after I'd been there for a little over 2 years, and I went back off and on, and I did a lot of things with them over the next few years. But I left in '87. After that, freelancing. I would do a movie for David Lynch, be out of work for 3 weeks, and find myself sitting on the floor of my 200 square foot apartment in Los Angeles, actually wrapping pennies so I could go down to McDonald's and buy myself a hamburger and fries, and that's all I would eat for the day. Because when you're freelancing, if the jobs aren't coming in, you've got to stretch your money somehow, and it's very difficult at first when you're starting out. And so I had all these great credits, but I wasn't making any money. And one of the things that I still believe to this day, I think it was true then, and I think it's still true now, is that as far as breaking into the industry, that's not the hard part. If you go somewhere and if you network and if you meet people, you will get work. But to get to that level beyond where you're making just entry level money, that's the difficult part. The difficult part is taking that next jump up. And so you have to spend years networking and years meeting people. And but the good news is those people are going to become your friends. And what we, I think, called in media life, Mark, are your semi-permanent work circle. Do I have that? Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah.
So you're going to have all these groups of people that you're going to be working with that are your friends, but they're also people who are going to work alongside you and people who are going to hire you. And so you'll have one group of friends here in one circle, another circle right here, and sometimes they'll overlap, and sometimes there'll be a third circle, and you'll have a Venn diagram in the middle. But this is how you get jobs. You meet people, you become friendly with them, and in film production especially, and Femke, I'm sure you can speak to this as well. You will have days where you're working 12, 14, 16, 18-hour days. And the people who hire you, I'm just going to be honest here, nobody ever hired me for my smarts or for my looks. I got hired because I was the person that people wanted to spend 12 to 18 hours a day on the set with. They knew that I would be a good person to be there with through the good times and the rough times. And that's what you're looking for. And that likewise, when you start out, that's the circle you're looking for. You're looking for the people that you want to hang with during those brutally long days. And people that, when you're working on a job for 4 to 5 months, and you're working 16 hours a day, the ones that can still make you laugh, and the ones that and the ones that you can make laugh. And that's really what it's all about. And and along the way, you will probably, as I did, blunder into some great projects. And you're very lucky when that happens. But mostly you just need to keep your rent paid and your food on the table. And so, if a great project comes along, if I'm being completely honest, a lot of times it didn't matter if it was a great project or not. I just needed a paycheck. And when they were great projects, you were just like, yes, this is the best of both worlds. I'm making money doing something that I love, working with great, talented people on something that has a chance to be an artistic and commercial success. And so bumps in the road, yes, absolutely. There's, the industry can be unforgiving, and it can be really worrisome, and you have to learn how to manage your money. You have to learn, that after you finish what you perceive to be a big job, you can't go to Cancun and blow it all, because if you don't know where your next job is coming from. So you have to learn those skills of money management and how to stay sane in precarious times. And it can be very difficult. It's challenging. And I don't sugarcoat that to my students here, and I wouldn't sugarcoat that to anyone. It can be a very, very difficult industry, but it can be extremely rewarding. And if you're a lifer, like I am, what else am I qualified for? I don't know how to do a real job. So I do this. So I worked in film for many years, and now I'm at a school where I teach film, and I just kind of regurgitate what I've learned in the industry and anticipate what I see going forward. And and if you're a lifer, if it's something that you feel like your life won't be complete if you don't do it, then you stick with it. But I always tell people, like, if you're not, you have to be really dedicated to this, and if it sounds too difficult for you, there's a good chance that it may be. You really do have to you have to be prepared to stick out the tough times, and they will be there.
Femke, I see you nodding. I'm assuming you agree. You have some shared experiences. Maybe I can ask you, or both of you, also in the context of what Brian was saying and what you were saying earlier, Femke, about sometimes you just do the work that it might not be artistically incredibly wonderful, but it pays the bills, like you said, like doing a commercial or something like that, and which to me raises a question of value, of how do you assess what you're worth. I mean, especially because these are careers. Creative careers are not exactly, there's not like an Excel sheet that you can pull out from somewhere and, like, if you do this amount of work, you will get paid this amount of money, right? There's no, there's a great degree of informality in not just in how people deal with each other. Like you said, Brian, you tend to work with the people who like to work with you. But it also, that informality also translates into getting paid. Especially when you start out, often you not even get paid at all. Right? You will get paid with reputation. This is good for your resume. Right. or you're underpaid because you're an intern, or just an assistant, or you just got started, or you don't get paid as much perhaps as you're worth because you don't know how to ask to be paid. At what point do you start becoming aware of your own value? I mean, how do you ask for it, or how do you demand it? How do you establish that? I'm appreciating, Femke, as well, that this perhaps is also part of the kind of advice you give for Cultuur en Ondernemen, the organization that helps and assists entrepreneurs in the cultural and creative industries. How do you even, and also for you looking back, when did you start doing that or appreciating, wait a minute, I'm actually worth something?
Good question. Well, I think first of all, it's very enlightening to be. I'm also now producing a film with my foundation, Vrijlings, which puts me in the role of the one giving out the jobs. Basically. Even though it's not a huge film, it's a very small production, but we're there is some production value. We have some budget, and you are kind of negotiating or thinking about who we want for the job. So it's interesting because being an actor is being at the complete bottom of where the money kind of falls through, and that's literally the case. I've seen lots of mechanisms where people on the set, who work most hard. I don't know, how do you say that? Who work the most
hardest?
hard?
Yeah, the hardest. Yeah.
Gosh, excuse me for my English. A little bleak. But they get paid the least money, obviously, because there's this hierarchy, and there's this producer's fee. Generally, the writers are already paid. The director will have his fee. There will be other people that are on the set with their jobs, and then we need to fill in the actors. So you're often at a point where people say, well, there's not a lot of money, and then you think, okay, well, what do you think your production is worth then? How do you do this? So very early on, I've had conversations. I've had an agent in a very early stage of my career, which helped me think about what I'm worth. And I'm not saying that an agent is for everyone, but I think once you're in a production in Holland, generally you can find an agent in generally quality agency. So this is not like something for just film careers or high paid jobs. An agent is approachable for anyone. Also, there was another reason. I wanted to learn about the industry, but also I wanted to I had other interests too apart from acting, and I wanted to spend at least the least time on reading contracts and all that stuff. Later I did anyway, because I wanted to do it myself, but in the beginning that was just a consideration. This agent, she really taught me to value myself. I've declined lots of jobs, especially in the beginning, just to she told me, she says, this is just not enough. This is just not enough money for what you're going to do. And there was, she made real sense of that. And even though when you begin, it seems like a lot of money, because the day price of an actor is always quite impressive, until you think of what you have to do to get that, because you have to do many auditions to get one job. So there's all these days are kind of unpaid already. You have to learn your lines before you're on the set. So all those days are generally not paid. Sometimes your rehearsal gets paid, lucky, but then you're on set and you get paid for just the moments you're on set. So if you have one scene on set, then you're very lucky. Then you think, I have this one scene, I've got my full day price. But it could be a 16-hour day as well, and then you have your full day price too. So these day prices for actors, you have to learn to look at it, and you have to learn to have a feel with that. But the bottom line of everything I've learned is that I am glad to help out a friend for nothing. You know, sometimes I just think that's a great thing you're doing. You put your heart in it. I'll help you. You know, I'll help you for nothing. That's okay. It's fine. Or I ask my proper day price. But if a kind of a dodgy producer comes to me and says, well, you know, I work for, you know, and then name any brand that's a billion industry or whatever. I work for, we're going to make a commercial and I offer you this and it's not enough. Then I really, really feel very, very strongly about declining that. And I've done that. I've done that in the past because, and that's not just it's not just from a moral perspective or anything, because I don't think, you know, I've got a lot of morality in this in my system to bring to this industry, you know, or ethical ideas about this is a commercial product, so this should be priced. But there is some some sense of self-worth and some sense of this is just not right. What you're offering me is not right. I'm not gonna be doing that job for 100 euros. I'm not going to be doing the job for 2 or 1 bottle of wine. It's just not right that you're asking this of me, because you know, I know you're going to be paid, and I know my director is going to be paid, and I know all the other people on the set are, you know, are probably going to be paid. So yeah, I do make, for every job, you have to make a new concept of what's right. And there are general prices. I mean, you said at the beginning of this question, you said, well, there's no idea about what you're worth, but in the theater industry there are some ground rules nowadays. There's also in Holland the different codes, how do you call it, regulations that are actually you know, there's the fair practice code, and I think that's very important, that when you're in such a vulnerable position, because this industry is made of a lot of zelfstandig ondernemers, which is independent entrepreneurs that, you know, without benefits or anything. It's the highest industry, you know, the cultural industry has the highest percentage of independent entrepreneurs. You know, you can't compare it to any other industry. So there's a lot of vulnerable people, and those, for example, this fair practice codes does give you an awareness and also a place to go if you think, well, this is not right. You know, there's something not good. And also the people that finance film in Holland or television, they, you know, the funding, you know, the people involved, they usually also have to kind of keep some ethical boundaries and some codes there. So there, you know, there are places to go to, but it's very hard. And yeah, so it always helps to ask around, you know, from how do you do this? How do you, you know, just talk about money, give your day price. Also share on the set, what you're getting paid, what you're getting paid. Oh, you know, this is dodgy, you know, and people want to hold on to themselves and think they're stronger because, you know, they've got an agent and, you know, they're, it's a vulnerable subject to talk about. But I think it's great to be open about it. You know, anyone can ask what I earn on that set, and then I can be either shocked or relieved, but you know, I'm not gonna take it personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Frank. Brian, a similar question for you. Like, I mean, the story of just showing up for work and then at some point sort of like, you know, earning this reputation and being asked back. And at one point, does that translate into some kind of sense of what your value is? And how did you find out? And I really appreciate, Femke, what you said about, you know, there are some regulations that do protect people in this industry, especially those working independently and, like you said, Brian, freelancers. I mean, in the United States, it is interesting that the creative industry, like especially film and television, is among the most unionized industries in the country. So I assume there are some protections there as well. On the other hand, we've just had the threat of a massive strike last year because of unfair labor practices. I think in this case directed against streaming services like Netflix, about ridiculously long days, and people still had to, find their own food and all that kind of stuff. So how do you in your career and how did you navigate that space, and what did you learn about yourself and your own value in the process?
Yeah, that is a great question. Femke, I don't know if this rings true with you, but I think that one thing that should be addressed at this point is probably imposter syndrome, which runs deep with me, very, very deep. I felt like for the first several years of my career, I felt like I had no idea what I was doing, and I was completely faking it. And it was, I'm trying to think, as we were talking, I was trying to think, when did I start to develop just a little bit of self-confidence? And I honestly don't think that was until, gosh, I was probably at least in my mid to late 30s, to be honest with you, before I, started to feel like, yes, I really do have something to offer here. I am a valuable contributor. It took a long time for me, and honestly, I still feel that way today. I feel like some days I wake up and I feel like, what am I doing running a film school? I don't know anything. I really honestly still feel that way. I feel like why are they asking me these questions? I don't really know anything. So it all of that still really runs deeply with me, and I honestly have to catch myself sometimes and think about, well, what I have accomplished in my life, and I give like little inspirational talks to myself, and I don't think that'll ever go away with me. But kind of to your question, like, when did you like, for instance, like, I'll say that I remember turning down my first job when I was 27 years old, because I felt like they had misled me on the pay. And I still to this day question whether that there was the right decision or not. But because I turned down a job and I was flat broke and I had no money, but they just made me so angry. They lied to me, and I just felt like, I am not going to take 25% less money than you offered me. I'm going to go home and starve and eat whatever potato chips are in the cushions of my couch. I literally felt that way. And and then I remembered when I started making, like, what could be more or less termed as rational decisions. Like, I remember like maybe just a few months before I was able to join the Directors Guild, and I was working as a production assistant where you make no money, but I had a choice, I remember at the time, of I'd been working nonstop for about a year and a half, and I was exhausted and I didn't really want to work at all. I had two choices. I was offered by one semi-permanent work group. I was offered a job working on a Clint Eastwood movie called The Rookie, and on the other semi-permanent work group offered me a job working for 2 weeks on a movie called White Fang in Alaska. And at the time, in thinking it through, is like, okay, well, what do I want to do? Which one am I going to turn down? And I decided, okay, I will. Would I rather go to Alaska and see this beautiful wilderness that I've never seen before, or would I rather go shoot 10 weeks of nights in downtown Los Angeles with Charlie Sheen? So I chose Alaska. And it turned out to be a great decision, because those were the folks who ended up helping me get into the Directors Guild, and that it worked out really well for me. Now, the downside of that was that the semi-permanent work group who were working on the Clint Eastwood movie, I never worked for them again I never heard from them again. And that's part of the downside of having multiple options and turning people down. And one of the things we all live with in fear in this industry is that, you go, oh my God, if I turn somebody down, they're never going to call me again. Well, that happens. It does happen. That is a thing. But you just make the best choices that you can, and you try to balance, what your self-worth is and how you want to manage your career against, at the time, just to use this example again, probably the smarter thing would be to do the Clint Eastwood movie, but I'm glad now in retrospect that I didn't do that. So as my career went along, I started to, eventually I started to feel like, I am somewhat competent at this, and yes, I do have things to offer, and and I do have skills. But it really, honestly, it took me a long time to feel that way, it's very difficult to maintain your self-worth in an industry where you're constantly selling yourself and you're constantly getting turned down. It's a real challenge, and it can play with your brain. And that's where having a group of friends who are in the same position as you can come in really to be a really important thing, because you need support, and you need to give support to your friends, because it can be a very difficult industry on your ego and on your mental health, and you really have to be diligent about maintaining those things.
I would, thanks. I really appreciate you sharing this, Brian, because in both your stories, if I may ask, and get a little bit personal at the moment, but there is this interesting balance between, on the one hand, the story of slowly but surely making your way into this industry, which is precarious, but also can be incredibly rewarding and fun, and getting to know the industry, getting a sense of self-worth, finding a sort of a middle ground between making it work and all of that. And behind all of this is also a very personal story. Femke, early on, you talked about that for you, looking back, a significant factor to sort of making it work was always being open and being curious, and having a kind of personality, really, that sort of worked for an industry like this. Brian, you're talking about, both of you talked about vulnerability. Either because you're an independent entrepreneur, you're a freelancer, or yes, you can be turned down for no clear reason at all. You're putting yourself out there, like you said, Femke, I never thought of myself as an actor, and all of a sudden here I am in front of the camera. Oh my God, what do I do next? And this is a story we hear a lot from people in these industries, right? That these are industries that you're not necessarily go into in the expectation to earn a lot of money or something like that, but it's very much an industry you're going into because you love doing the work. You love being part of a great production, of working with people that are passionate about what they're doing. This shines through to both your stories as well. Now, I can appreciate that kind of passion, that kind of personal investment and commitment to work also is the very thing that makes you very vulnerable. Right? Because if somebody says we're not going to hire you, it's not just you or your skill set. It's like you as a person that gets rejected. If they're not going to adopt your idea, if they're not going to pay you what you think or know that you're worth, that is not just a statement perhaps about you as a professional, but also as a human being. Now, and so I appreciate in your stories that how you navigated that space. And now looking back, and I appreciate you're both also still in the middle of a career. We're not doing a lifetime achievement award thing here, but what have you learned about yourself in that process? I can appreciate that this is also an industry that confronts you with yourself. So if I may ask, could you share something about what you've learned about yourself? And Brian, you talked a little bit about imposter syndrome and overcoming that. Femke, what is that like for you?
Another good question, I think. Well, first of all, let me be very honest that when I say I turned jobs down, it also meant I was having a day job at the time, that made me able to turn jobs down. So on a practical level, I had a few years that I did solely or mainly or acting, and that I could maintain myself financially. I'm independent. I don't have a partner who, takes care of me financially. So I have to support myself and my family. And so I had, from very early on, I had other jobs. And this is, maybe perhaps it's easier for me because I always expected to have those other jobs, because I went to study social sciences and I wanted to work in the art industry also as a policy maker, as a coach, as in other jobs that fulfilled me. So in that sense, I'm different from Brian, who says, this is what I want to do and this is what I can do. And well, God bless. Well, you didn't say God bless. That's in my own head. This is what I am able to do. And so in that sense, I kind of worked my way around the situation to be most vulnerable. And I think in a way that for me, that was a natural process, because I did have other interests and I still do have other interests. And I still do very much enjoy earning money with different skills than acting. But there's also a downside, because it made me vulnerable to situations where I more often than I wished had to decline a job. Because it would have too big of a consequence for my day job or any other job I was doing at the time, which very it made me, for example, miss a television series that I could have a lead part in. And that was not the best television series, so I had a bit of doubts, like artistically. And it's always a mixture of, how do you make decisions here? But I've looked back, and I don't have regrets, but I do think, what would have happened if I just went for that? So maybe that's that moment in the bar on that place when you're older, and that makes you actually wonder, well, what would have happened if I did that? But there's always a moment after that, and the moment after that is that I also can very well live with the choices I did make. So I might have missed out on that one, and I actually have no doubts I kind of missed out on that one, because it would have offered me more name recognition, because I'm kind of known in the industry, and I'm glad that directors I really like want to work with me. But I have no big name reputation in Holland, in the sense that I'm like recognized on the streets at the moment. I mean, there was a time, but not right now. This television series could have made that happen. So yeah, I could kind of see that as a bad judgment or a bad decision. On the other hand, my life is not just about my career, and my career is not just about acting. And that makes, for me, the difference. I think that's the difference between, well, having, feeling that this is what you want to do and it's the only thing you do and your life's depending on it, and choosing to not have your life depend on it. And it also works the other way, because also it happened that because I had money on my bank account, I could decline a job, and then 2 weeks later do the job I wanted to do, better, which maybe for a little less money, but it was a great job to be in. So it also brought me, it limited me, but it also brought me a little bit of freedom.
Right.
And in Holland, there's, I want to tell everyone who's, pursuing this career, it's nearly impossible to live full time of an acting career. I think if you think that only 2% of the actors actually do that, that might be even exaggerated, because I think that a lot of actors that have that kind of life, to go from one series to the next, from one film to the next, a lot of them still, show up in quiz shows, or still do commercials, or still do other things they weigh and they kind of have to do to maintain a living. So, this was in a little way, or in a way, this is also about vulnerability, because it's also vulnerable to make that choice and sometimes feel that you're not one of the real actors that did acting school, that did drama school, the actors that actually say out loud, well, take me away. This is the only thing I can do. I can do nothing else. So I'm glad to be in this production. And I sometimes think to myself, yes, but I can do other stuff. I have other skills. I can do that. But does that make me less of an actor? So new doubts, obviously.
A little imposter syndrome there as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's also that every decision you make, it comes with new doubts or new confirmations, obviously. But it's nowadays, it seems like a bit of a granny thing to say, but nowadays I'm pretty happy with the choices I generally make, because I kind of, like I said in the beginning, you sometimes want to tell young people to say, oh, don't worry about your resume, because it will happen. And then you look back and then you think, oh, that's the resume, and now if I see my own resume, I think, yeah, that reflects me. That reflects the person I am. And yeah, it's good. I did follow some kind of instinct. So yeah.
Lovely. Thanks, Femke. Brian, how would you look at this and what you've learned in the process? You've already told a little bit about how you felt along the way and how you thought of yourself, but in general, sort of like, what have you learned about yourself in dealing with this precarity and this vulnerability that we're in because we're so invested in the work that we do?
Yeah, it's interesting. After I left Indiana University and Bloomington, Mark, and we haven't talked at length since then. So there's some gaps in my story that you might not be aware of. It was really difficult after I left, because my Elizabeth, my wife, got a job in Indianapolis, which is about 40, 50 miles from Bloomington. And so we were set to move to Colorado, and and we decided, no, we'll take the job in Indianapolis. And if you've never been to the United States, Indianapolis is just kind of a big, ugly Rust Belt American city with not a lot going for it. But my wife got a good job there, and I said, okay, well, let's give it a go. And I spent about 15 months there. When I got to Indianapolis, I thought, well, I have a master's degree. I have a distinguished background of working in the industry. Surely there'll be something there for me. And as I started to go around and talk to, the different people who work in media there, everybody kind of said the same thing. They kind of said, yeah, you have a really interesting background. There's nothing for you to do here. but you have a really interesting background. And so I spent the whole time there. I was a stay-at-home dad. I didn't work at all. We had our daughter was 1 year old when we moved there, or maybe 2, and so I stayed home and took care of her because there was nothing for me to do, and that was a huge blow to my ego, and just kind of sitting at home and thinking, I moved to a big American city where there is literally no work for me, was very hard to cope with. And the interesting thing is, when we had really wanted to move to Colorado all along, and then just coincidentally I saw this listing for a job as the assistant director of the Colorado Film School, and I applied and I got it. But I have to admit to you that it was pretty hard on my ego, and it's pretty devastating to after doing all the work to earn a master's degree, and after everything I had done in the industry, to all of a sudden just feel like, yeah, there's nothing in this large American city for you to do. And what I've learned, coming back here and doing this job and being in this position, is that there actually are there's still some things that I am good at, and I do have untapped skills that I've discovered late in life, that I've been able to summon the things that I learned in my career as an assistant director in the industry, and I've been able to apply them here, more than just a knowledge of the industry, but there are skills that I picked up along the way that I use to this day. So I don't know. I guess I guess the moral of the story here is something just really cliche, like stick with it, or don't get down, and have confidence in yourself. All the cliche things that we say to one another that also have the added benefit of being true.
Okay, I'm not gonna let the two of you escape this easily, because but the last question I would like to ask you follows up on this one. It's also a personal one, I guess. I mean, Brian, you already mentioned it, that you have a lovely daughter. Femke, you as well. You're both, let's just say, very successful in your career as parents. If your daughter would tell you, like, Mom, Dad, this is the career for me. I'm going into, any of the media industries, whether it's music, where you got your start, Femke, or film, or games, it doesn't matter. If I can ask you, press you to be honest, would your first instinct be, oh my God, no? And then your second, way to go, do follow your heart? And then thirdly, what would be the rational advice you would give based on your expertise, based on what you've learned, based on everything we talked about today? Who wants to
go?
Yes.
You go first.
Well, I would maybe it's safe for me to say I would instantly be enthusiastic, because I know for a fact that my daughter has no interest whatsoever in the work I'm doing. I mean, she literally has heard about films I'm in because of the classmates, has been, they have seen those films. I've done a scary movie, and, she's a teenager. They watch scary movies. Her classmates have seen this scary movie. She doesn't, she loves scary movies, but she doesn't want to see a scary movie with her mom in it. She has no interest whatsoever. She has no interest in becoming an actor. She does show some interest, for music and photography. I think that's lovely. It makes her obviously very, very happy to be working with arts, even though, I don't know if she wants to do that as a profession. But what I first and foremost want to tell her is something which is actually a new subject if we want to, but we're not going to. I know you're kind of rounding this down, but I would really tell her to not care, not make what she thinks she needs to make. So there's this industry at the moment, also in the States, but also in Holland, is very, it became, there's a lot of politics in this industry as well. There's a lot of political correctness in this industry, even though you think, it's the arts. The arts are free, it's like an expression of freedom and of the most individual stories of different minds who make these beautiful works of art. And how can they can only thrive when they're original, when they're personal. They don't have to be a reflection for a support group. They don't have to be a reflection for a whole identity group. I mean, recently, great actors. I mean, there's so many examples of, great actors like Helen Mirren, for example, was, criticized because she played a Jewish character, even though she wasn't Jewish herself. Luckily there's also some rabbis that say, that's ridiculous, and she's an actor. She should, her job is to not be herself and to become someone else. And I think for anyone in this industry, whether you're an actor, but for actors, this is a very poignant and very sensitive subject, I think. But for anyone in this industry to not feel like you have to follow the rules of what is politically interesting or what is artistically dominant, because what you are going to do is only going to be original and is only going to be touching people if you stay somehow in one way or another, stay original. And I think that would be my advice to my daughter, to just say a little fuck you to anyone who wants to mold her into something else, because the industry of arts are not made of people that are molded into someone else.
Beautiful. Thanks, Femke.
Yeah.
Brian, what would you had some time to think? You were asking Femke something. I think, I'm sorry if that got drowned out, but
I was asking Femke, how old is your daughter?
She's 15.
Okay. So my daughter is 9, and so for her whole life, she's been hearing these stories, which from me. She was very into Star Wars, a couple of years ago, and now she's into Harry Potter. I mean, I'm so proud of her. She's like ripping through Order of Phoenix, right? And she's, and she loves it. And so, we do this thing where where when she finishes a Harry Potter book, I let her watch the movie, which a lot of parents do, I think. And so we're watching these movies, and I'll say, I'll think back to her obsession with Star Wars, and I'll go, and I'll pause the movie, and I'll go, hey, Sarah, let me tell you about the time that Daddy was at a party with Han Solo and Sirius Black. And, and she'll just do this thing where she gets this, this big, her eyes get wide, and she practices it, I think, where her eyes get wide and her jaws dropped for the appropriate amount of time. And then she goes, okay, Daddy, can we just watch the movie? We'll turn on a movie, and I'll go, oh, see that actor? Daddy's worked with that actor. Daddy knows that actor. And she'll, like do this almost stage thing where she registers what she thinks is the appropriate amount of amazedness. And then she'll just go, okay, Daddy, can we just watch the movie now? This happens like almost every day at our house. So I think, Mark, your question is, would I want my daughter to go into the industry? That's up to my daughter. I don't, I feel like, we are, trying to, we're trying to raise her to be an independent person who we're trying to teach her to make good choices. And, beyond that, we want to have confidence that we've done the right thing as parents and train her to make those decisions. So whether she chooses to go into the arts is up, that's going to be up to her. I would be as honest with her as I am with my students, or as I hope I have been during this talk, about the ups and downs of that. I would be very frank with her, and I would let her make her own decision. We, at the beginning of the pandemic, I bought myself a new guitar, and I bought her her first guitar, and we started giving her lessons, and she didn't really take to it. And the guitar's still hanging up on the wall, but she doesn't really go to it. But if she does one day, and if she wants to be the next Olivia Rodrigo or Taylor Swift, I will completely support that. She wants to go into another field, she wants to go into the sciences, or something in between, like my wife, her mommy does, being a designer. I will support whatever her interest and passions are, and I will do the best as a parent to help her make the best decisions she can, and let that be her own decision.
Mm-hmm. And beyond that parental sort of wish for them to sort of pursue to their heart's content, Femke, you said, as long as you're staying original, true to yourself. I'm hearing that in your story too, Brian. What would be perhaps the more rational advice, the advice not so much to perhaps to this beautiful child that you have, but to
and I guess Sophie, didn't we?
I guess I'm not so much looking for the cliche that happens to be true, as you so beautifully said, Brian. I guess what I would love for us to end this lovely conversation with is some sense of, to me, there's always two stories about the media industry, and in this case, our case, film and television. On the one hand, it's a story that we can tell about an industry that is exciting, fast-paced, constantly changing, new technologies, new genres, new, exactly what you're saying, Femke. There's new dominant ideas about what stories should be told and how you should be acting and what you should be doing, and things are changing all the time. It's like very dynamic, and so it's a thrill, and then there's this second story where the things you've shared today about how you make it work, and going from one production to the next, and supporting yourself throughout your career, and never being 100% certain about what comes next. You're only as good as the last thing you did. This balancing act between being personally invested in what you do, but also having to pay the bills. And yes, you're vulnerable, but you also need to have some kind of security, especially if you're a mom or a dad. So those are, for me, are two very different stories, about fast-paced, rapid change, and exciting and dynamic, and much more sort of grounded, everyday slogging through, making it work, and finding some kind of balance. What's the best way to think of preparing yourself for something like that? Has it to do with something as simple as knowing yourself and knowing what you want and who you are, so it's a personal thing? Or is it acquiring these 3 or 4 key competences, and if you acquire those, you have a better chance of let's say winning. What would your final option be?
Go ahead.
I think if I think of myself and what I've and also people around me, what keeps you going is enjoying your crafts, I think. And you know, and craft, you know, you don't have to be, craft can be more things than one. Craft, I mean, a craft as an actor is to know where the lights are, to know where your sound is, to know where what people around you may happen for you in order to be able to do your job. So knowing the craft is one of the most fulfilling things, I think, in this industry, because of the loudness of it, because of the buzz and the success and the failure and everything around it. It is when you're doing the job, you know, actually doing the job, whatever job it is, you know, on a film set, everyone has a craft, but enjoying that craft is gives you all the gratitude, and will always lead you to the next job, because that craft is what people will appreciate, also will appreciate the most. I mean, not the big audience, maybe they don't see the craft, but the people you work with, you know, directly, your director will recognize your craft, you know, the people around you will recognize your craft. And it could be a very modest craft, but it's so much more fulfilling, I think, to have a modest craft that you really enjoy doing. And modest, you know, I don't know what I mean with modest, because it's like the film is literally a combination of, you know, thousands of modest crafts, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But when you enjoy what you're doing, I think that leads you to the next step. And you have to find your craft. And it could be just something else than if you go to film school, learning to be a writer, or if you know, you might end up being working for you know, a company that finances films, because you maybe you didn't like the writing so much, but you are great in reading stuff, and you're great in filling the gaps, or you're great in putting people together. You know, you don't have to know film to work in film. You have to know about stories or good people, or about beauty. You know, you can be in the film industry or in the media industry from very different angles. I think it could be from, you know, you could be a real technician, or you could have a great a performance, or you could be just really enjoying working behind the scenes, literally. But everyone in that industry needs to find that things that triggers you, and I call it a craft.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Find and enjoy your craft.
Yeah.
Brian, the final word is for you.
So I want to kind of go back to, you know, if we're still, the question is still like, what would I tell my child to, you know, to I guess prepare themselves for? And I kind of want to go back to, you know, to a concept that, you know, that we used to talk about a lot, which is the fact that we don't live with media anymore. We live in media. And as part of that, what I would tell my daughter, if she was interested in acquiring these skills, is that all of the crafts that Femke is referring to, like being able to white balance the camera, being able to do basic lighting of a shoot, being able to use a nonlinear editor and to put together a short piece, being able to do something like color correction. All of these are skills which are going to come into play in her life, because media is just a part of everything that we do. So, whether my daughter or anybody's daughter is going to go into media, I think it's going to be extremely valuable going forward just to have those skills so that you can incorporate them into other parts of your life. You may go to work for a company and you may be trying to, at an entry level, and you may be trying to figure out how to make yourself useful. Well, if you have those skills, those may come in they may come in extremely handy, or it may not. But I think that that in today, that having media skills, whether you go into the industry or not, are going to be a really vital asset for anyone entering the workforce. And to me, entering the workforce and being prepared for that is all about having options. What skills do you have? What do you have to offer an employer, no matter what your field? And I think that one of the things about filmmaking is, and one of the things that I try to get across to my students, is that making a film and making media is an extremely complex endeavor. It involves management skills, it involves soft skills, it involves technical skills, and it involves getting people to come together and work on a timeline which they're not necessarily happy about, but getting them to all come together and meet these deadlines. And this is basically project management. So if you're able to make a film, if you're able to make a piece of art, if you're able to make a piece of media, you have taken a complex project and you have broken it down to its most simple elements, and then you have built it back together and you have produced something. No matter what field you go into, that will always be valuable. Project management. So I tell my students, if you can make a movie, you can pretty much do anything. You can pretty much manage anything. It's all the same. It's just about breaking whatever project you're doing down into its most basic elements, and then rebuilding it in a way that is that it's efficient and that it works creatively. So I think that my take on it is, is always, if you come to film school, like, look, I have 300 students here. They're not all going to go into media. They're not all going to make movies. But what we do hope for them is that they go on to careers, whether they're entrepreneurs or whether they go to work for a company. They're going to want to go on to careers where they are managing other people and they are managing complex projects. That's how you make money, right? That's, you don't get it by being at the entry level your whole life. You learn how to manage people and you learn how to manage projects. That is key. Acquiring skills, learning how to manage people, learning soft skills, learning how to work with people, learning how to persuade people to do things that they don't necessarily want to do. Like, these are the most valuable things, I think, to me, that that you can learn. Learning the technical skills, learning the soft skills, learning the management skills, and then whether you go into media or not, you can pretty much do anything.
Well, I love that both of you ended up with this emphasis on, what did you say, Femke, modest crafts. and the notion that a media production is a combination of thousands of modest crafts, and the skill in managing that and bringing that together and playing your part, whatever part that is. I think that's a wonderful image that I would love, that I think is great to conclude our conversation with. So I want to just thank both of you, dear Femke and Brian, again for taking the time out of your busy days to sit down and chat about all of this. And you know, and I desperately hope to see both of you in person very soon to continue our conversation.
It would be lovely. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for the opportunity, Mark. I really appreciate it.